Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Chax Chat podcast. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am director of media productions here at Chax Training Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you'd like your certification, head over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and get more information. Hey, Chad, how you doing, man?
Good, buddy. How about you?
Oh, working hard, man. Working hard. I'm at the tail end of halfway through the koi pond. So I've got all of my mid-level bricks all done. I just am waiting for the inspection tomorrow. So fingers crossed everything's go well.
Yeah. Hopefully that goes well for you.
Yeah.
I know it is hot here. It is like 92 and the humidity is like through the roof. You know,
well, you guys get crazy humidity there. We do not. We do not.
Which is really nice.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sure all of our listeners from all over the world have varying levels of this weather themselves. So we're kind of preaching to the choir on that one. But wherever you are, I hope you're staying cool or warm. Probably cool. Hopefully cool.
Saturday, it's going to be 109, Chad. Saturday is 109. 104 on Friday. Yeah, we're doing good. So, Well, to be brief, right? We want to make sure we satisfy those people that are like, what the heck are they talking about?
Right.
Today's podcast, we're going to talk about something really, I think that's important. It is a principle of one of the classes we teach called Designing with Accessibility in Mind. And it is about designing covers that are accessible and thinking about the cover of your magazine and how the content on it is accessible. And the reason we're talking about this is we had a client come to us, and we'll leave names out of this because, you know, everybody's learning. And they had a cover that's typical, and we're going to put up on screen a sample, not the client's, but a sample of the same structure. And they've got at the top, they've got a kind of a byline of an important story. And then in the middle, there's this, or toward the top again, it's the kind of the subtext of the magazine. And then the title of the magazine, volume, web link, and date. And then at the bottom, well, in the middle, it's a big giant picture of a group of people. And it's an important picture. So it's not just, you know, decorative. It's alt text worthy. There's a story toward the bottom third, and then a couple of links to additional stories at the very bottom. So a lot going on in this cover. And as we were remediating it, the client asked, well, why did I tag it the way I did? And the reason he had a question was not because of what's on the cover, but because of what's on page 3. And Chad, you were kind of surprised when you learned what was on page 3, right?
So on page 3 was the actual table of contents, right?
Uh-huh.
So it was like all the contents of the book, but in the lower left corner, there was a paragraph that said on the cover, right? So it said, it was like in bold, it said on the cover, : and then it was a description of what the photo was about on the cover. Right. And so it was just a great use of, we often get into a little bit of a trap, Dax, where we're like, okay, everything in our document needs to be read in a linear fashion from, top to bottom, in this particular order. But you had read that text at a very appropriate place in the document, which was on the cover. Right. So as the client is reading the cover where the image would normally have been read, I believe.
Yep.
You were reading that text that says on the cover. And I just thought it was a great experience for the end user.
Well, the client disagreed with you. The client was like, why are we jumping from page, he said, I started reading the document with NVDA, and he goes, like 2 tags in, it jumps from page 1 to page 3 and then back to page 1 again. What's going on? I said, close your eyes and do it.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so he was that person was evaluating the document, trying to correlate site and keyboard navigation using NVDA. Right now,
Yeah.
again, there are lots of people who use NVDA who are sighted, who use it for a cognitive impairment. And I totally get that. But in this case, the idea here is that we need alt text for this image. It's an important image. It's a bunch of people standing on the steps of an important building, being present for an important event. And they took the time to describe it. Unfortunately, though, they took the time to describe it on page 3, where you and I would normally look at the cover, and as we're going through the magazine and we get to the table of contents, we're like, oh, look, there's a description for the cover. That's cool. And move on, right?
But that is a very common technique that is used in print.
Yep.
Like you see that in many, many magazines, right? Where I get a magazine. I have a stack of them right here on my bookshelf. It's a Pennsylvania magazine, and the covers are always beautiful artwork.
Mhm.
It's usually a nature, a wild turkey or a squirrel or whatever. And then you open up the cover, and on page 1, right,
Mhm.
it says on the cover, and then
Right.
it gives you a description of what that artwork is on the cover. Very, very common technique.
Yep.
The problem is, right, certainly that works because for a sighted user, right, I mean, you wouldn't want to put that on the cover because that takes away from the aesthetics.
Right.
So instead we said, okay, let's read that on page 1. But to somebody using assistive technology, as they're reading that cover, they need to know what's on the cover.
Right.
And so that description of the cover for somebody who is using assistive technology, it makes a lot more sense to read it when they're on that cover. And I say many times, Dax, when I'm doing training, for somebody using assistive technology, the concept of a page is irrelevant.
Right.
Right. Now, to be fair, NVDA and I think JAWS does let you know when you move from one page to another, but it's very brief. It's very quick. It just says page 2, right? That's all it tells you.
But if you're in the middle of a paragraph, it's not going to tell you page 2. So
Okay.
It doesn't interrupt the reading order or the reading experience. And so I think that's, a lot of times in our experience as a sighted person or a person who's not a native assistive technology user, we don't understand the user experience, which is why I try to use AT every single day. I am constantly in it, constantly trying to manipulate the document to be able to listen to it. I mean, today, Chad, I just increased my reading speed. Now I'm on speed boost, rate 35, I think is where I'm at. I was on rate 24 or rate 20 before, which is really fast. But yeah, it's understanding that user experience. And in this case, the sighted experience of seeing the page flip back and forth is disjointed. But for the screen reader user, if I'm listening to the table of contents, I've already been through. This is page 3 that the table of contents is on. It's not on the back side of the cover or the next item after the cover. It's literally, 15 or 20 elements of other objects before you get to it. It's very fragmented. And some of our listeners might be thinking, well, why not just take that description and make it alt text? Well, The problem with that is there's a link inside that description. And so we all know there's this nasty little bugger called untagged annotations where you cannot have a link that is clickable, but not have it be part of the tag structure or the page content. So while I could copy that whole thing that says people sitting on the steps of this building, yada, yada, for the day event, see page 29 to 36 for the story, I couldn't actually artifact that entire piece of content on that page because of the link, because then the link wouldn't work for people who want to click on it with a mouse. And this goes back to designing with accessibility in mind. So had they not put the link in that content, then it would have been fine. We could have absolutely copied that text right into the to the cover alt text, and to say see page 29 to 36. That's not a barrier. I could definitely go access that without it being an active link inside of a piece of alt text. And it's not that bad to not have it be clickable inside the PDF. It would have solved both situations, but without purposeful design, that experience is just something you and I can talk about now after the fact.
Right. And so yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, right. I mean, you pointed out two things, one of which was, you don't want to have that untagged annotation.
Right.
And then the flip side of that is alt text can't have a hyperlink, at
Right.
least not a clickable hyperlink. I mean,
Right.
you could type the URL in there, but the user is going to have to
remember there's no copying it.
Oh, you can't copy it.
No.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you can't copy it out. So if you say, nic.edu/ blah, 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 they're going to have to remember that in order to get it.
Exactly. So. And the other thing I wanted to bring up when you mentioned that, so I will say it is a very unique skill to be able to use assistive technology and understand the experience, right? I mean, I know we teach a class, Dax, on, document testing with NVDA, which is one of my favorite classes to teach, but it's one thing to learn how to use assistive technology. It's another to understand the experience.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And one of the things you had said in that document, it said, see the story on this page 29 to 36.
Mm-hmm.
Why put the range in there?
Yeah.
Why would I want to go to the last page of those articles, of that article? You know what I mean?
Sure.
I hope there's not a link on 29 and 36. I think that would be a not an ideal experience.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they're just linking to page 29. But even as a sighted user, I don't find any value in you telling me the range of pages that an article occupies. Just tell me where it starts. That's what I'm concerned about.
Well, what's interesting about this document is there's lots of details on page 32. See page 41 for continuation of this story. That makes it for a really hard accessibility. Well, I'll put it this way. From a screen reader user standpoint, it's an easier experience because you would artifact that link. Well, you couldn't even artifact the link. You would just have to put it in the right order. So instead of giving them a link to page 36, now that I'm talking through this is kind of a conundrum, right? Because on one hand, you could organize the tag structure so that they don't have to go to page 31 to see the story. But
then it could also be disruptive.
Exactly. So,
you're forcing them to go there.
So I think I think the takeaway here is if I'm designing a magazine with accessibility in mind, I'm going to try to keep all of my stories linear as possible. I don't need to tuck the last bit of article on a page 10 pages ahead.
Wow.
Because that's a print magazine technique when they're trying to maximize every inch of a page. But if I'm developing a document, a PDF document that is electronic, I don't necessarily need to take up every piece of every page. But does that mean I'm designing two different documents then? And that, I believe, is a barrier. That makes it much harder for design publication companies to then, create magazines, right? I don't want to have to create an accessible version designed one way and then a print version designed another. So I don't know. I don't know that there's an elegant solution there.
No, but you bring up a good point. I mean, and what you're talking about is what we call cross references,
Mhm.
right? So, like in Adobe InDesign, I would do the see page 27 or see the article blah 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 on this page.
Mhm.
That's a cross reference,
Sure.
right? But what you brought up another thing, which is in print magazines, they'll often lay out the first 8 pages of the article,
Mhm.
and then it'll say continued on page 72.
And this does
Right.
that. Yep.
And so this is going back to what you just said. I think when I'm laying this out or when I'm remediating this file, I'm going to have the entire article read at one location.
Right.
I'm not even going to let them know that it continues on page whatever.
Here's the
I'm
problem.
going to organize.
The problem is if it's a link, if in the PDF it says continued on page 27 and that is a link, you can't have an untagged annotation.
Well, I would just delete the link.
But then the sighted user wouldn't be able to click on it and go to page 27.
Another
See?
conundrum.
Yep.
Another conundrum.
It is really about design. And you mentioned the class that you love teaching, document testing with NVDA. This was not a softball, but that class is actually coming up July 27th.
Oh, that's right. We have that in like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. And August 10th is our InDesign Accessibility Best Practices class as well. Those are our next 2 classes coming up. In just a couple of days, on July 20th, we have Secrets of Writing Effective Alt Text. So 3 really great classes that really, and these are 3-hour classes, guys, and they come with great handouts and all sorts of stuff, but I don't want to turn this into an infomercial. So
no, but I mean, it's a really good point because your writing effective alternate text class, it's a stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yep.
Right. I mean, like on paper, writing alternate text is so simple, right? Yep. Oh, all you got to do is describe this image.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, people get stumped really, really quickly.
Chad, this morning I had this document. I was reviewing it, and the image was 3 females sitting at a table being instructed by another female in an outdoor classroom setting. And I had a discussion with the person who had written the alt text, and they had said a lady presenter, presenting to a group of 4 women. And I went, you can't say that. And he says, what do you mean? I said, you just assumed everybody's gender identity. And you have no idea how these people identify. So better, instead of saying a female presenter or a lady presenter presenting to 4 women, it would be a presenter to 4 students or 4 attendees, right? There's no reason to identify a person's gender unless it's meaningful. If this was a women's conference about women and you wanted to note that these were all women or that there was a woman presenter, sure. But in this case, it wasn't germane to the story. So to identify that they're all female was, 1, assuming, and 2, not really necessary. So I know we kind of sidebarred there, but it's,
and to be fair, it was probably very innocent.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, we have a tendency to like try to make things very black and white, but you bring up a really good point when you mention that, because you're absolutely right. You know what I mean? Like, we're making an assumption, but it's also, and that is something that the students would learn in that class, writing effective alternate text, right? Because you ask yourself, what do you want the user experience to be, right? And how do you want it prepared? Because another question that we get asked a lot, Dax, people will say, is it important for me to identify the ethnicity of the person?
And you just said it's very black and white. And in my mind, I went, you can't, it's, and right. The idea here is not to be hyper vigilant. It's not to be overcritical. It's not that you can't say, hey, I'll see you next week to a blind person and go, oh my gosh, why would you say that to a blind person? It's common speech and it's not a dig on someone's ability, right? And to say that something's black and white is not somehow a dig on race, right? But when we talk about alt text, it's about meaningful context. And that's really a key principle that we teach in the class, which is if it's meaningful to know a person's race, then sure.
Right.
Or their gender,
Yeah.
or the diversity of the group, or whatever, then it is, right?
Yeah.
So that was such a big sidebar. I want to go back to our cover. So the bottom line to this is understanding the user experience as you design, because a lot of this could have been solved had the person gone, I don't know that I want that by that link to this first article on page 3 to be the very top thing in my document. Maybe I'm going to put it as something lower in the content order, or I'm not going to develop it as a ribbon at the top of my image. I'm going to put it at the bottom, right? So where you put the visual element on the page can naturally make the read order be more meaningful. You don't have to switch read orders and play with the tags tree and do all this advanced stuff. It's just, hey, I can put that blue stripe at the bottom instead of the top. That's not a big design consideration, right? Instead of having a 20-minute conversation about read order and what do I really want this experience to be, you already know. And so, like this byline that says, it's just a secondary byline, and it just is kind of a thought bubble before the title. And so what do you do with it? I look at this design and I go, well, it's not really a heading.
No.
It's just a P tag, but it's bold and it's in a blue box, and I don't know. I mean, so it's, again, visual hierarchy translates to reading order. And when we design with that visual hierarchy in mind, then it's, it becomes easier to understand the tag order. Like in this document, the biggest thing on the page is the title. I assume that would be the first thing they'd want to be read. And in the client's defense, that's what they wanted to be read.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would say visual hierarchy equates to structural hierarchy.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
You want to create that equivalent experience, right?
Yep.
But I want to talk about another element of that cover, Dax, that was really interesting. And we run into this a lot, right? Like a lot of times when people design a cover, they want to go outside of the limitations of the product that they're using, right? So in our case, we're talking about InDesign. It could be Word, it could be anything, but they want a more integrated, more aesthetic cover.
Right.
So a lot of times they'll compose that cover in Photoshop.
Oh, yeah.
Or they'll compose that cover in Illustrator, right? And when you do that, by default, there are no individual components
text
that can
blocks.
be tagged. Yeah, there's no text blocks. It's just an image. It's a figure, right? And what I loved about what you did in your cover example, Dax, is that the nameplate for the cover. So the name of the magazine, it was an image. It was part of the photo for that cover. And what you did is you added a text element to the document that could be tagged. But what I loved about what you did is you made it the exact size as the image of that nameplate in the photo.
Yeah.
And that was a really nice, like,
nod, right?
Yeah, I'll tip my cap to you, because what I love about that is, a lot of we've talked in this podcast before about hiding elements on the page to produce a better experience.
Right.
The danger in doing so is that for a user who is partially sighted, who uses assistive technology, it can become a bit of a cognitive impairment, because what gets highlighted on the screen is totally different from what is actually from what's actually there on the page, right? And it can really be confusing. But by you making the text the exact same size, it appears to highlight that item within the photo.
Yes.
And that was a really elegant way of implementing that. I applaud you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I will add to that. Let me show you what this other one is that I've got right here. So this document is a map of the United States. and it's got a series of pins on the map that shows where the different locations are, right?
I saw this. Yeah.
So what do? Well, it's not listed. The text is not listed anywhere on the page. It doesn't say what the different states are, or even what the different cities are. But the client provided a list of those cities. And so then what we were able to do is we were able to go into the figure and just tag alt text for the figure that says map of these locations. But then the list, we were able to tag the list. And
that's nice.
And instead of just having a block piece of text for the list, we put each of the LI items behind the dot on the map that signifies the marker. So as you hear it, you're going to hear list 30 items, and then it's going to cycle through each one of the items. And then it's going to visually, you're going to see the marker, the little NVDA's highlight marker, move from item to item to item that matches where those dots are on the map. So again, tag experience versus correlating to user experience.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this is what I love about PDF accessibility.
Yep.
I love the ability of being able to manipulate the tag structure to do my command, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, this is a really creative solution, Dax, where, so for our audience, it's a map of the United States. The state borders are visible, but nowhere does it tell you what state is each one. And then each marker doesn't tell you what city it is within each state.
Yep.
But what you did is you put text elements behind each one of those markers, organize it into a list, and it creates a really good experience. I mean, honestly, Dax, I would argue that this could be a barrier for the sighted user.
It's almost a reverse bias to where but see, here's the discussion I had with the client. I said, okay, client, I can look at this map, and because it was untagged originally. And I said, what are we doing about this map? Because I can look at this, and with my limited knowledge of geography, I can see you have 2 offices in Florida and 3 offices in Washington. I don't need a text label. So I'm getting visual information that a non-sighted person's not getting. And they said, well, how would you do this? I said, well, I would just provide a list, and put it behind the thing. She goes, well, should it be by state, or should it be just a list of all the different offices, or how should we organize it? And I said, well, I don't know what's meaningful. Is it useful to know that there are 2 locations in Florida? I said, looking at that, I couldn't tell you what those 2 cities are. I have no idea. Or what the 3 cities are in Washington. But I know that that's the shape of Washington, and that's the state of Florida, and that you have Texas, but then there's nothing in any of the Midwestern states. That's all visual information that I'm getting. Yeah. So while you and I might say providing someone with a specific list of all the list elements that is giving this non-sighted user an edge up, I would say that from a visual standpoint, there are things I'm getting as a visual user that the non-sighted person is getting as well. So I think there's a barrier or a difference in information on either side, but the goal is equitable presentation. How can I try to make these 2 experiences as equal as possible? And that's really what we're going after.
Well, and to be fair, right? So as a sighted user, I live in Pennsylvania.
Right.
So my eye is immediately drawn to Pennsylvania, and I know there's 3 locations in Pennsylvania.
I couldn't tell you where Pennsylvania is on this map.
Come on.
I swear to you, I couldn't. I don't know what state it is.
Well, and I was going to say that, like in this map, most of them are in populated states. Yeah. There's no markers in Nebraska. Right. If there was, I would probably get it wrong, right?
Sure.
But my point is, you could have gone another level, right, if you wanted to, and created headings for the name of the states.
Sure.
And underneath each heading, have the list of the offices in that state. And that, because there's 30 markers on this map.
Mm-hmm.
So the user currently has to peruse 30 list items and kind of read them all.
They can just
you
press.
know,
They can press P to go to the next paragraph, or H to go to the next heading. You could skip the list. Part of the organizational elements are using the screen reader. If you got to item 12 or item 10 and you're like, I'm done listening to this, there are shortcut keys you can press to get out of the list and move to the next element.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, if I want to know what offices are in Pennsylvania.
Oh, I get you. Yeah.
I really have to listen to potentially to most of them until I get to those offices. So if you put some headings in there, you're giving them landmarks where they could be like, oh, I'm not interested in California. I'm not interested in Washington, you know, and they could jump to, oh, Pennsylvania, what are in Pennsylvania type of thing. So,
well,
anyway, it's a
good exercise.
It's just really, yeah. Right? I think so too.
And the other thing that would solve all of this is on the right-hand side, just off the coast of Florida. If you would put in like 9-point type or something, that list of 30 items that the person gave me initially as a visual element on the page, just to list out all the city states of the different offices, then everything's solved. Visual users get to see what the cities are. Screen reader users can just walk through that list, and it's an equitable user experience.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I would recommend that because this map is very plain.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it does look like there's something missing, but you could have adjusted the design of this and then just list all of them off to the right, you know, and just say, you know, and even have the state headings and everything. And in that case, you could have kind of eliminated the work that you had to do to do what you did.
Right. To move each one of those list items underneath the dot that's there on the map. That wasn't a 2-minute process. I mean, it was definitely longer. So
for sure.
So some really good cases, guys. This is designing with accessibility in mind. This is really the core of why people say accessibility is so hard. No. If you start by designing your document, thinking about these things, accessibility at the end is just a little extra work, right?
Yeah.
But when you don't, it's this conversation. What do I do now? Now that the cake is baked, how do I take out the poppy seeds and the cake? I mean, it's, you know, a pair of tweezers and some time, right? I mean, you know, but really, I think our takeaway for our listeners here is that when you're thinking about designing the elements on your cover, think about the hierarchy and structure that you're trying to relate. Think about what's on it. Think about how you're going to describe the image. And if you're going to put that description on another page, great. But if you put the link on a separate line even, or break it out as a something else, then that alt text could have been described for the image. There's a whole process there, right?
Yeah.
And then as far as this map goes, think about the user experience. And you and I were kind of bantering back and forth about what's the best way to present the least amount of barriers to both the sighted user and the non-sighted user. How do you balance that? And I think those are the key takeaways I hope our listeners get from this exercise today, because I feel like these are two really great examples of real world cases where people start to say accessibility is hard. But I want to ask to give you a moment, Chad, to talk about to answer the objection that the source document is easier to be accessible than a Word document. That I think that we hear this all the time where people say, well, I just want it as a Word doc because, you know, I can present a really good user experience. And I know that you and I often say, I can present a much better experience in the PDF.
Right. Yeah. 100%. And I don't want to correct you. I think you had said a Word document. You had said the source document could be better than the Word document. Is that what you meant?
I meant that the source document is a Word document, and it's better that some people say, look, I know that my source document, which is a Word doc, is more accessible than your PDF. Your PDFs are terrible. And our answer is always, I challenge you. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
I'll fight them every day of the week on that. Absolutely. I mean, I could do way more in a PDF file than I can in a Word document. You know, people think that their Word document is more accessible, but I could do way more to a PDF to create a good user experience than I can in Word. No question about it.
Imagine this map, Chad. I was actually thinking
Yeah.
about this while we were talking. Imagine I had to do this naturally in the source. If someone said, okay, Dax, I see you did all this fancy stuff in the PDF. How could I do that in the source? I would have to make a list in one single text box and then adjust the leading so that it gave me enough height for each line, then make 30 different individual boxes that would fit just each one of those LI items, and then move each one of those individual boxes underneath the point inside the map so that it would, when it was exported, it would stay a natural list, but look this way. That would be an enormous amount of effort inside the InDesign document.
It would, and to be fair, I wouldn't even mess with that.
No,
I'd let them all export as P tags,
Yep.
and I'd change them in the PDF file. Right.
Yep.
I mean, that would be the non-time consuming method of, it's like, sure, I would love to do it in InDesign, but InDesign doesn't give me the ability to do what I'm trying to do. So you just kind of, I call it a sacrificial tag, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of let it output as it is and I'll fix it later, type of thing.
Yeah.
But no, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I will, and we talked about this where people have said to us, blind people have said to us, PDFs suck.
Yep.
And it makes me, it doesn't hurt my feelings, but it hurts my feelings only because all it means is that they've never gotten a good PDF file.
Yeah.
Because I always say to them, let me give you a PDF file and then tell me what you think. You know what I mean? Because I know we can do good work.
Yeah.
So yeah, really good. I think this is a great discussion. And I wanted to say to Dax, I love it when you and I disagree.
Agreed.
I love it when you and I disagree because I always learn something.
Yeah,
and I hope you feel the same way because
Absolutely.
I love when we talk about something like, oh, no. And we start going back and forth and ultimately one of us learns something in the discussion, and I
think both of us learn something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I encourage all of you, all of our listeners, you guys have peers who are doing this work as well. And I encourage you to argue, right? I encourage you have those discussions. It's how you learn. It's how you learn new techniques and new approaches to problems. And
and if you don't have somebody in your office to discuss with, our PDF accessibility Facebook group has 3,600 members in it. There is someone, I can think of a few people right off the top of my head that are ready to argue with you or discuss with you about techniques that you might want to employ. So just go onto Facebook and search PDF accessibility. We love you guys. Thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. Chad, we are approaching almost 30,000 downloads of our podcast.
Oh man.
It's on the horizon. I can see that, in maybe a week or two, we will hit 30,000, which is just so
that's
cool.
Really cool. It's hard to believe, Dax, like 2 years ago, you and I were on a phone call one day and you said to me, Chad, we should put this on a podcast. I think people would be interested in hearing this, And I know I looked at you over the proverbial phone line and I'm like, are you serious? But you were right. And I'm really glad that our listeners enjoy these discussions and approaches to problems and finding solutions to them.
Well, and for our listeners, if you've got a group of people that struggle with remediation and you want to have those discussions, go onto our website. We've got one-on-one time you can book with us. It's up in the upper left-hand corner, or find us on LinkedIn. We're happy to come to your organization, either virtually or in person, and have those discussions, review your documents, walk you through the hard stuff. If you've got an 800-page environmental report with 500 tables in it, which I absolutely see all the time, reach out to us. We can help you develop a workflow that is going to change the way you design and think about accessibility, because we can make it much, much easier for you in the beginning than trying to struggle at the end going, I hate accessibility. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, listen, I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the discussion and our banter back and forth. And, we just want to remind you guys, if you're looking for in-person or online training, or just struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head on over to accessibilityunraveled.com to learn more. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.
That was a great podcast.
I thought it was too.